All right. Welcome to Range of Strength podcast. I'm sitting down here today with Garrett Kulijian, also known on the social medias as at G Money Movement, the Supple Dragon.
Yep.
And recently, I think I saw there's another one there. What was that one? With the coach, what was the tag?
What are you talking about?
There's another account that you were using. It's just kind of like
Troy.
Yeah. Troy Gold.
Troy.
Yeah.
That's the alter ego, the movement alter ego.
So you're in California.
Yeah. Kind of San Diego area.
Nice, man. I'm over here in Eastern Canada. It was a nice day today, and I was like out there with like sweater and sweatpants on, and I was like, oh, it's so nice. And I was like, Gary's in California.
Yeah, we have a little bit of a cloudy day today, but it's been the sun's been starting to peek out, so
nice.
It's gonna be a nice summer.
Awesome. Thanks for taking the time to sit down and talk with me, man.
Dude, it's an honor. It's an honor to be on the legendary Range of Strength podcast, man.
We've been connected for a while just through following each other and just watching each other kind of go on different journeys and training and stuff. But we were talking about doing a death metal jam session for this podcast, but came around to thinking that like we could sit down and have a good conversation about hip impingement. Obviously we can get into a lot of other things as well too, but that's one thing about your journey that intrigues me the most is like you were diagnosed with FAI.
Yeah.
And
in college.
Yeah. So I think like from talking to you, that's kind of like led you into this like greater journey into like understanding your body and, like wanting to help others and kind of troubleshoot that scenario. And I think that is a discussion worth having because hip impingement it's one of those things that just gets dropped all the time without maybe as much understanding on like what it actually is from that kind of scenario or other ways that we could navigate around it and things like that I think that you've obviously spent a lot of time troubleshooting. And I'm excited to get into that kind of conversation, man. But if we could start with maybe you sharing a little bit about how that kind of came to be, like that would be really cool.
Yeah. So I guess we could take the long story here, but I kind of noticed something was wrong. It's like ever since I was introduced to, weightlifting and squatting back in high school. So like freshman year of high school, playing high school football, soccer, all those stuff. Basically our coach, he was, old school strength coach, made us squat ass to grass with everything. And as he was demonstrating like all these, squatting patterns, cleans, snatches, all this stuff. Basically I would try them out. I'd fall flat on my heels and, you seeing all my other teammates squat and it's just like, okay, something's different about my hips and, and I didn't have any pain at this time. Like all throughout high school, my hips never bothered me, but I just always felt blocked off with things like squatting, like you just hit a roadblock and you just fall back. And you know what? I made a mockery of weightlifting at the time. Like I hated any form of fitness. Like I was just in it for the sports. Like I just love sports. And
yeah, that's cool.
Honestly, like, dude, I would just fuck around. I'd try to stack as much 2.5 pound plates on a bar and just grunt. Like I was just in it for the laughs. And honestly, it was probably because I was masking my embarrassment for like not being able to achieve any of these positions.
Right.
So that developed some insecurities around just lifting in general. And then, leading up to me wanting to pursue sports in college, I ended up playing soccer in college. That's around the time where I realized, all right, I got to start, trying to develop my body or else I'm going to be at a big disadvantage, to all the other players in the college level. So that's where I was really getting into the performance side of training and just really trying to explore that route. And then, as I was getting into more structured lifting stuff, I had to try to figure out how to get into these positions,
Yeah.
So fast forward, I remember junior year of college, that's when I started feeling, hip pain. Cause, it's 3 years in of, hard smashing yourself to the floor. So that's when I started realizing I was getting this hip pain. And I remember I went up to my strength coach in college, just like, hey, I got this little pinchy feeling in my groin, both sides. And he didn't even know what was going on. He's like, I'll just take a week off, see how it is. And I knew it was something more than that. It didn't feel like in the normal, like muscular strain kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, honestly, looking back, like I probably should have listened to him and like actually took some time off, but that was like never the advice I would ever want to hear. It was like, oh, just take time off, know?
Yeah.
I always wanted to, just add things in.
Yeah, try to find a way to like make it feel better rather than just resting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then all throughout college, this is when I was getting into physical therapy and wanted to study physical therapy in college just because my own body, just trying to figure out how to get my own body to go from shit to suck, as Nito would say.
Yeah.
So I was super into the Kelly Starrett stuff back then, joint distractions, lacrosse ball smashes, all that stuff. I mean, everyone who's gotten into mobility training, I'm sure you have a similar background. They all find Kelly Starrett first. I wanted to be the next K-Star. But then something different was born, the supple dragon, not the supple leopard.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I remember I felt entrapped kind of in the body. Like I would always have to bring my bands and, supernova smash ball, like to the field with me, like we had a track workout. I would get there early, anchor the band to the pole and, just hammer away on that for 30 minutes. And it was very restrictive. Like I could never just get somewhere and just start warming up, brief general warm up and then go,
Yeah. So were you like when you were diagnosed with FAI, like how did that happen?
Okay. Yeah. So it just wasn't going away. And then I ended up seeing some doctor back east, and it was just blanket diagnosis. Like the FAI thing, it's kind of like, okay, we do a few orthopedic tests that are naturally going to stress the hip in weird ways. And then they give you that blanket statement. You have femoroacetabular impingement.
Yeah.
And then later on, I ended up getting an X-ray and MRI, and it showed cam impingement, which is, so there's two types of impingements. I don't know if you know, but cam impingement, where there's the head of the femur, it's not completely round and smooth. It's got some bumps on it, and it doesn't allow it to kind of rotate nice in the socket. And then there's the pincer impingement, where it's kind of the overgrowth of the acetabulum on the head. I can't remember, honestly, it was a long time ago. I know for a fact there was cam, but I don't know if there was a pincer too. A lot of times you can have both. Yeah. And then labral tears in both hips. So yeah, that was.
Did they recommend surgery? Like, did they say like?
On the spot, dude. It was like, it was such a scary thing. Like I was a kid, in college, and they're like, yeah, this is something that won't be fixed without surgery. Like traditional rehab isn't going to influence, the bone and everything. Yeah. Okay. So that's where I was kind of left.
Yeah. And then at that time you chose to opt out of surgery and to kind of like go the other way and navigate that.
Yeah. Cause Kelly Starrett and people were like that. They were kind of talking about this. Oh, you have hip impingement, you got to just work on the joint capsule and all this stuff, which is still an very incomplete idea, oversimplified.
Yeah.
But then I was just kind of looking it up, and there's other people who've been diagnosed with this, but they're now pain-free.
Right.
So like I was just doing a crap ton of research, because being cut open just scares me, and I've never had like a major surgery for anything really, except for like teeth.
Yeah, and a lot of times when you do have those major surgeries, you still carry with you some form of discomfort or neglect in the body from that surgery. It's not like, it's 100% now. It's like,
oh, dude,
you know,
Yeah.
like I've had
You're always going to end up.
my arm was operated on. It's like,
Okay.
you know, it's definitely stronger, but there's always like disconnect there and some discomfort. And, you know, there's been something that's gone on there that was, you know, change. But, and that's where I think, yeah, in that scenario where it is like an FAI trying to get solutions to like, well, what am I not doing? Because I think that's what we're, especially with that diagnosis, and a blanket diagnosis as well, like you said, is quite common with that. My wife has actually experienced that. She never went and had like the MRIs done and anything, but it was a very blanket, like there was no troubleshooting about like, well, what are you doing for exercise or how. It was just kind of like, yeah, it's FAI, you know, like, it's like, what? Like, let's evaluate a little further here.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny how it is always kind of resorted to like that's exactly what it is, rather than like, how can we train a bit differently or think about like ways to navigate that. And that's, yeah, I think where I've watched you and your training, and it wasn't even until like this year I realized that you were training through that and like overcoming that kind of so yeah, it'd be cool to hear about like, you know, what was the big changing point.
So in terms of my training, so after college, you know, when you're training in a, you know, collegiate sport, you're always kind of in limbo. And I was always into like, you know, performance training, CrossFit style stuff. I loved Olympic lifting. So after college, it was like, all right, now I'm going full on with strength. You know, I've always been this endurance athlete. Like I want to get strong as fuck. So I got into Olympic weightlifting, like, so clean and snatches. And I remember my body just got so beat up. I was on some like 36-week clean snatch and squat program. And like I was squatting super frequently, snatching, cleaning, which is basically, you know, when you're dropping into the hole, it's just violent compression of the hip, you know, in the joint, especially if you don't have that extra wiggle room, like, you know, people who have been Olympic lifting since they were a kid.
Yeah.
So it just came to the point where my shoulder was super inflamed, and it's just super chronically. It was probably like a year I had this shoulder pain, and it's obviously from snatching, like with a horizontal, like 45-degree torso, and, you know, head turtle heading out. And yeah, like I just developed so much crap in the body. And then I was going into physical therapy school like the next year. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to be the physical therapist that's completely in pain, you know? So like, and at this time I was still doing all the Kelly Starrett stuff. It's been years. Like I've been doing the Kelly Starrett stuff. I probably saw his first 10-minute squat video freshman year of college, just trying to figure out all this stuff. And it's been what, 5-6 years, and I'm still the exact same. So that like now I'm really like asking the question, okay, like why am I not making lasting changes? And like I would reach out to the guy. I was on his forum, not forum. I was on his forum, like I was subscribed to whatever his stuff, and they're just like, oh, you got to just do it more. You got to just keep doing it more. I'm like, I'm doing this stuff tons of times.
5 times a day.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so I get into all the other different, you know, mobility systems out there. Like I'm seeing FRC pop up. Actually, it's a funny story. Like so the gym I was working out at, you know, when I was in the Olympic lifting days and everything, that's where I met DJ. He was a trainer there, Strong Camps. You had him on your podcast. Yeah. And I remember I was just taking a dump one day, scrolling on Instagram, and then I saw Dr. Spina reposting DJ, like, and I was like, oh my God, I remember this guy from my gym. He was a trainer at the gym I was going to. Yeah. So then I reached out to him, and that's who got me into the FRC stuff. He introduced me to Ito and just all different types of stretching. You know, there's loaded progressive stretching, ballistic stretching, like different methods that Kelly Starrett isn't using, the big smart, you know. And I'm like, stretching. All right, and the people using all this stuff, like they're crazy flexible. And like I'm starting to see all these before and afters of people who are naturally stiff and now achieving all these positions, like deep squatting, pancakes, like all stuff that like was a dream to me. Like I would never I never thought, like, honestly, I got into flexibility training just to achieve a deep squat. And then I just thought I'd be content with my life. But it's just like any other skill. It's like, okay, I got the squat. Now what else can I achieve?
Yeah. Yeah. I had the same experience, man. Exact same experience. Just wanted to feel better, move better. I was never able to squat ass to grass comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started stretching my ass off because everyone, exact same, man. Everyone that I saw that had that flexibility, like they were working their ass off. And there was, 6 different modalities of it that no one was talking about. No one was talking about the variations of flexibility training. And I'm like, fuck, I don't know anything. It's like,
exactly. I wish I started following you back in your powerlifting days. Cause I think I started following you back when you were the bodyweight dad.
Yeah. And that was kind of the start.
The
start of that journey. Yeah. I wasn't on social media as much. There's like an old YouTube channel from my powerlifting days that's still up. But
that's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, man. So you started getting into the flexibility work.
Yes. So now back at the time, I thought like, okay, I found all this new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have the answers now. So took the FRC course, started implementing all these different types of modalities. But the problem was I was just kind of implementing them in my currently existing strength program,
Right.
So I was doing all the in-range strength stuff on top of the hybrid Olympic lifting, powerlifting, bodybuilding program that I was doing.
Yeah.
And I was just starting to feel stiffer,
Body was resistant.
And that's the thing. And that's the big misconception with things. It's like Kelly Starrett's stuff. He comes from the CrossFit world where it's not sexy to stretch. It's just, we want to do these WODs. So let's give these little non-taxing things you could do before your workout. 10 minutes a day is his thing, right? And then there's FRC and like all the other stretching stuff where it's like, this is the training. This is all you can do.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the kind of misconception with stretching, is that it's not a form of adaptation that like requires a recovery, it requires recovery to adapt, right? It's just the thing that people just throw into their existing training. But you have to take
no change.
Yeah, exactly.
No change.
And then you end up getting worse at both, or just mediocre at both, right? So you have to kind of implement it in a way that allows you to recover in, both aspects.
Yeah. That's what's been cool about watching your training evolve too, is like, it was like, as my training was evolving that way, like getting back into like strength focused work, but keeping the flexibility there, and seeing your training evolve that way too. I was like, man, he gets it.
I know. Yeah. We're definitely on the same path with this stuff. And I love how you're coming out with all this like squats and split stuff. Like, honestly, if I saw that stuff back, 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago, when I was getting into like actual flexibility training, that would have been like all the answers I needed there. Like just to see somebody doing it and still making progress for like yourself and like thousands of people you work with or whatever.
Yeah. But it's funny because the number one thing, you experience this too as a coach, you must, when people come to you, is that they still want that quick fix. Like, can I do this with my Olympic lifting, or can I do this in such a way where I'm not going to lose gains? And it's like, okay, no, not really. Like you can kind of I think you can rope people in to be like, well, let's just get started and see like how you feel about experiencing like real flexibility training. And I think most people, unless they like just kind of throw the towel in and like, no, this isn't for me. And then they won't really find their answers, but most people need to have that exposure for a little while to be like, I got to give the other shit up for a little bit.
Well, once you take them through an actual like middle split session or something, then they're going to realize, okay, I can't just do this after a giant like 10 by 10 squat workout,
Yeah. No, that's
or maybe
cool.
You can, as long as other variables.
Yeah. So like, how has your training, well, I guess like I've seen it, and obviously all these listeners that are listening to this after this, they got to go follow you to see like the stuff that you're doing. Like, how has it evolved now? Like, can you talk about like some of the things that you've broken through on, and like the direction you're kind of going with your training?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. So when I got into FRC, I fell into the trap. I gave up strength training and I went full on like, oh, can stretch this. Like I was a lover boy, you know, and I gave it all up for probably a year. And my whole thing was like, okay, I'll just do this stuff. I'll give it all up for 3 months.
Yeah.
And then the fact that I'm giving up everything else, all of my focus will be on flexibility. I'm going to get flexible in 3 months.
Yeah.
No doubt. You know, I gave it up, saw nothing, saw no change, you know. I probably went down this route for a year and it didn't, I mean, I made some progress, of course, especially with the end range strength stuff, you know, like if you've never been exposed to that stuff, you could make some pretty quick neurologic changes with that. I saw that stuff early on. And then, you know, anything after that, then it's like, okay, now it's going to take tons of time. But I didn't realize that. And so it was probably like a year or two down that route, you know, decided to test out some squatting again and, you know, barbell lifts. And I was just completely weaker, not much more mobile, you know. And then, let's see. Okay, during this time, then I got into Ito's training. So more movement culture style stuff. Wanted to try, you know, learning handstands and just doing all the skill related stuff. I found Ito back when he came out with his squat protocol, like his squat, like just learning,
squat routine,
just researching how to develop a deeper squat. You know, you find Ito's videos on YouTube. And then I just, you know, dive further down his YouTube page and it's like, look at this guy move, you know?
Yeah.
Like he's got complete freedom in his body. I feel completely trapped between all these bones in the body. And now, you know, I kind of wanted that. So I went down the whole movement pathway and I'm still like really in deep with the movement stuff. But so that's where I was introduced to the loaded progressive stretching, forms of ballistic stretching, stuff like that. But the way he programs it is just super high volume, or at least how he programmed it back at the time with his online coaching. So he was doing a lot of loaded stretching, like 5-6 times a week.
Wow. Sometimes
twice a day. And it was too much. And my hips were even starting to become more sensitized to that. And
right.
So it wasn't working. I would say last year is when I finally got off Emmett Lewis's wait list. So I've been working with Emmett for about 1.5 years now.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, you know, I think that was probably the prime time of, you know, my progress for sure.
Yeah. Things I could see even in the last year, like it became much more focused practice, like attention to qualities and details and like all of those. It's like all those pieces were there that you've been working on, like from everything, right? Like all the things you picked up from FRC, you went the Ito route and like all this stuff. It's like their qualities were still there, but you were, it was like everything came together in unison. And you know, there's kind of like a little bit of a moment there where you're like, oh, it doesn't have to be all in on this and all in on that. Yeah. It's like take the best pieces of those and make a program that works for you. And I can see that that's kind of what's happened in this last year. And you've been making some substantial progress for sure.
Thanks, man. Yeah. I think the biggest light bulb moment of like, while working with Emmett was just that you can implement all this stuff and still make progress. Like you could still train the strength. You could still train the hand balancing. You could still train mobility. And like, you can do all of those to its fullest, but still make progress. And I think that's the biggest thing I've been researching now is like how to keep getting stronger, keep getting more flexible while not giving up either of those attributes.
Nice.
And I think that's this type of work you're doing as well. Yeah,
you know? For sure. Yeah. 100%. How are the hips doing now? Like, do you find...
So I'm still dealing with some stuff. They're not perfect. And like, for me, the middle splits have always been my biggest kind of problem area. Like my adductors have always been the most guarded, and that's pretty common in people with labral tears.
Right.
So that's like the big thing of like figuring out how to just calm these adductors down and hip flexors too. But they've definitely come a long way. And like, I could squat on command, like whenever I want. I don't need a big warm up. My leg day warm up is maybe 15 minutes.
Right.
My hand balancing warm ups are more extensive because you got to warm the wrist. You literally got to warm up everything. But yeah, it's, dude, I'm like, I don't need any bands. I don't need any, lacrosse balls. Like my whole philosophy's changed, and like, I could just go anywhere. I could go to a park and I could just start moving without restrictions, but nothing is completely cured yet. And I think, there's a lot of people, on YouTube, especially talking about FAI and stuff, that they're like, oh, like, you'll never have to deal with this again. Like, do our program and you'll be fixed. But I think, no, I mean, you're going to be kind of at a biomechanical disadvantage just because of bone shape, but it doesn't mean it will become problematic. So think of like morphology versus pathology. So morphology is like, okay, you may have abnormal bone shapes, but it doesn't have to become a pathology. So it can become a pathology where, you do have the abnormal bone shapes, you have the labral tears, but you're also overloading your body. The stress on your body is overloading, or it could be underloading. You could be underloading your body. Like, I get a ton of patients in the clinic who have hip pain, but they're sedentary workers.
Right. Exactly.
And, or there's a ton of impact in the body. So like, the structures in your hip are just colliding all the time. So that's why FAI is super common in sports, cutting sports, soccer, basketball, ice hockey, rugby, Gaelic rugby. I know there was like 400% increase in like hip arthroscopic surgeries in Gaelic rugby over the past few years. Like, it's been crazy. And it's just like you said, how like you get this diagnosis. I know we're going off on a tangent, but
no, this is what we need to talk about, man.
Yeah. It's like you get this diagnosis and they're left with these like, okay, now what? Well, you can have a follow-up with this ortho surgeon and see where you go from there. Like, different healthcare practitioners are just passing you off because they don't have the answer for themselves. Yeah. So, and then, maybe you go to physical therapy and you're just on ice packs, heat packs, and just doing some generic hip, whatever exercises. So, man, I don't even know where I was going with this. So,
well, I think you're going in the direction that like these people that we're going to for answers aren't taking the time to understand their bodies enough to be able to tell us and teach us how to understand our bodies. It's just, I'm going to look in a textbook and this is a diagnosis. You're just going to go to the next line and get taken care of, get surgery or whatever. I mean, the hips are probably the most complicated, I would say, in the human body. Everyone's display of hip ability is different. Like, it's,
absolutely,
it could be an imbalance from the hamstrings. It could be an imbalance from, rotation. It could, like, it's all, the hips are the most complicated part of the body, and people aren't finding answers with like how do you actually like learn how to use your hips properly? How do you train in such a way where you can just like improve those capacities? It's just like, go to the next line. Go to the next line. No, that's what you were saying the other day, is like you're now a doctor of physical therapy yourself, and you've taken that journey to understand your body so that you can now help others understand their body. Like, I want to go to you. I want to go talk to this guy. He's training his ass off. He's, has his own issues and limitations, and we all do. Like, at the end of the day, we all have our own little things that we're dealing with, right? But that's kind of part of the problem as well, is that people are just not getting answers. They're just getting shoved to the next line, and no one's actually taking the time to try to understand their capacities at the hip, for example, right?
That's the biggest problem in healthcare, man. I think you and Jeffrey Wolf talked about it on your podcast, but like how a physician or a doctor would tell you nutrition advice when they're obese, It's kind of the same thing. It's like, why are you taking movement advice from someone who doesn't even move? Yeah. And I do think it's like, it's got to be a prerequisite for physical therapists who are supposed to be movement specialists. Like
right.
That's like the definition of a physical therapist, a movement specialist. But like these people don't even move. Like they're just desk jockeys doing paperwork a lot of the times. And I don't think you have to, you know, do the same stuff I'm doing or anything. You just have to be exploring your body's capacity, exploring your body's whatever limits, you know, like a run, maybe you're into running, maybe you're into tennis, maybe you're into just something to where you're training your body. And you can be getting some injuries here and there, but you're figuring it out. You're trying to figure it out. You got to be into something, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, more of those people need to be accessible when people are given like a blanket diagnosis like that. Cause I think even a lot of times, you know, it can just come down to the fact that no, you don't actually have FAI. You don't have impingement. You just need to actually improve rotation of your hip or improve hamstring length. Like it's just these things, right? Like some people are, and you can see the defeat in being diagnosed with that. Like some people are just like, oh, well, I guess I can't do anything. Like I was told that.
So here's the thing, like the studies now, I mean, it's pretty clear. There's people with labral tears, subchondral cysts, all this different crap going on in the hip, but they have no pain. So I was actually looking at a study last night. I think it was like 2018. They took like 300 athletes coming from, you know, rugby, dance, all these different type of movement disciplines. They looked at their symptomatic hips. I think like 90% of them had whatever type of morphology, labral tear, cam, pincer impingements. And then they just looked at their contralateral hip, and like 50% of them had the same thing, labral tear, different impingements, but they weren't symptomatic. Like they were feeling no pain from it. So if we have all these athletes that have no pain, but they have all this other stuff that people also are in pain with, it's like we can't really correlate them. It's like saying I have hip pain and I have black hair, therefore people with black hair have hip pain. You know, it's like it's tough to correlate it.
Yeah,
especially because the labrum itself, you know, it's the shock absorber in the hip, and it does not do good with surgery. It you know, it's been pretty clear that it, you know, the more you spend time operating in a joint, the more it will lead to arthritis. But now there's also the myth that surgeons will tell people, it's like, you don't get surgery, you're probably going to have arthritis. And, you know, it's the same thing with like meniscus surgeries, shoulder. But yeah, it's, especially in athletics, man, there's such an emotional part of it too, because their only answer is surgery. It's like the surgeon, everyone wants an answer, like 3 months, you'll be back on the field, or 6 months, you'll be back on the field. Good. But it's just not that case. Like it's going to be a long time. And I would rather take the route of, you know,
exploring what you haven't.
Yeah, exactly. Like you need to exhaust all your conservative options before you even go the surgical route. Like I'm not even thinking about surgery at this point at all. Like there's been times in the past where I'm like, oh, you know, I'm just not getting more flexible. I was using all the excuses, you know, genetics, everything. My dad played professional rugby. He had 2 hip replacements at age 40. You know, that's super young. Yeah. So like it already put it in my mind, like I'm not meant to be flexible, you know?
Right.
But it's just not the case. Like anybody can adapt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone can adapt, no matter the age.
Yeah. And then you just look at the traditional prescription of exercise, and there's nothing outside the box, man. It's just like, here's some basic strength movements. Here's some basic stretching, warm up, cool down, whatever. Yeah. And there's so much more out there, and no one's being presented with it. And no one's like taking the time to go, like the people that are taking the time to go, like put themselves in those environments, like as coaches, that's the thing, is like, you got to be willing to put yourself in an environment of like growth. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, and this is like completely new, and I'm really shitty at this. And if we can learn to do that, we can find some answers, and we can learn how to I wouldn't even say like deal with these kind of symptoms that we'll have to deal with, but navigate them in such a way where we can do some pretty incredible things. Like we can actually improve our flexibility. We can actually find different ways to, you know, create some kind of routine besides just like the traditional, you know, prescription that's being offered out there. So yeah, I think that's the other kind of message that needs to be delivered here. Like if you are dealing with some kind of hip impingement, like what haven't you done? And usually it does come down to flexibility training, like in a way where, like you're saying too, like you're actually going to train and learn to adapt and recover.
Right.
Traditionally the same way we would train and do with strength training.
Absolutely.
So, and like saying, keeping that message going, you know, keeping that message out there for people to hear is like so important, because for most of those people that are dealing with these issues, they haven't even scratched the surface on that stuff.
I know, man. So like when I get somebody that comes to me with these same kind of problems, you kind of initially treat it like any other injury. So like the first thing to check off is load management. Like, are you still, you get punched in the face and you have a black eye, are you going to still punch yourself in the face? You know, you're probably not going to heal.
Yeah.
So like, how can we manage volume in a way that isn't insulting the body, isn't, you know, causing, you know, excess shear and strain on the hip. Right. And then we look at how can we create more space in the hip itself. Yeah. You know, that's where the flexibility training comes in. And then the motor control aspect, like, are we moving correctly? You know, are we squatting like a stripper and you're causing early jamming of the joint?
Yeah.
And then it comes down to stability in the joint. Like, are we building strength around all the structures in the joint? Something interesting too is like, it's like, okay, so we know in studies, the labrum isn't the thing causing these intra-articular hip pains. It's like, so what is it then? And you have all these small muscles, like you saying, the hip is so complex. There's all this stuff around there. There's tons. I think there's maybe like 10 muscles that are just crossing the hip joint. And then there's, you know, a bunch of muscles that insert into the capsule itself. And a lot of the times it's tendinopathies of these muscles that are inserting into the capsule. So it feels kind of intra-articular. I saw a study recently. It was like the rectus femoris was like a big cause of anterior hip pain. And it's like, okay, you can't, you know, your hip flexors are tight as shit. You sit all day and you don't train. It's like, there you go. There's what you're not doing. Like, explore that route. So yeah, that's the basics of it.
And like, so for you with now working with clients, in these kind of capacities where they're coming in and they have, you know, these snares with the hip, taking those steps, are you finding that like rotation work becomes like at a high focus point for these individuals? Because I mean, it is like an important, it's certainly something that needs to be addressed. It's very popularly being pushed out there right now is like rotation, and like internal rotation. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And with your experience, like, how have you been using that approach and what you're seeing and stuff?
Yeah, it's a good and relevant question, because I think 2 years ago, I would have been like, yep, rotation is everything. If you don't have rotation, then your hip is just not going to move well linearly. And that's the thing being put out there right now. But I am kind of on the other side of the spectrum now.
Interesting.
I think I take more of the muscles approach. So especially in the hip, you know, it's common that, you know, you look at the capsule, then the one joint muscles, then the muscles that attach to two joints. So deep to superficial. I mean, for myself and other people I work with, I'm kind of noticing it's the superficial musculature that's, you know, restricting the joint from actually moving. So I do think it's one of those things you try out and you see if it works for somebody. Like, if you do a lot of internal rotation work, they don't have a lot of internal rotation work, and they start to feel better, then good, we're onto something. But a lot of times I'm finding if you push internal rotation work and you're getting like a bony limit and you keep pushing it, it's just going to make things worse.
Interesting. Yeah.
And you could just be causing more inflammation, and especially in an area that, so it's like we get these bony overgrowths for a natural adaptation to whatever you're doing. So especially in cutting sports where, okay, the athlete already doesn't stretch, so they already have limited space in the joint. So, you know, you're getting this early ramming of the acetabulum and femur. So that's why the bone responds to growing more bone. So it's like, if we're training internal rotation and we just keep slamming ourselves, jamming ourselves into a bony block, then we might just be making the problem worse and,
right.
you know, causing more bone to be grown over time.
Right.
So it's just something you try out. You see if it works for someone. A lot of times people have more internal rotation than they think, and
right.
So I do work that early on, but I think it gets to a point where you're not going to get too much. And the more internal rotation you're going to get is from softening up the adductors, softening up the hip flexors, softening up the piriformis, and going down that route. So I know for myself, like, I don't do too much internal rotation work right now. It's more just for structural balance. So like training side splits, you're working a lot of external rotation. So then I'll balance it out with a lot of internal rotation stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of the thing, like, you know, you try it out, see if it works. And if not, go the muscles route.
Yeah. I like that idea for sure. Muscles do the job. And yeah, what kind of softening work would you recommend? Like, because then that's the concept too, where, you know, we're sitting on a foam roller for, you know, an hour and stuff, but kind of getting away from that. Like what kind of areas are you navigating with that now?
I mean, tension, like, you can't find relaxation without tension. So like, you know, the strength work with flexibility, I think a lot of people, especially the adductors, they're very neurologically tight. So you got to get them strong. A lot of Taylor's pose work, heavy Taylor's pose, heavy adductor flies, side split, isometrics. I really like the contract, relax, agonist, contract, or paled rails, whatever you want to call it. So like you build a lot of tension in the muscle group, and then take big inhales, or big exhales, and then relax it out. And you can go deeper. It's kind of like the Kit Laughlin approach. Yeah. Just building comfort. I think the comfort comes after the range has been built. Yeah. I think, you know, using the end range strengthening techniques, all that stuff, loaded stretching to build the range. And then that's where the passive stuff works well to, you know, get comfortable in the new range you've built.
Nice, man.
I think right off the bat, just like taking a naturally stiff person and just like, all right, 2 minutes in a pancake, you know, like, I don't think that goes over well. I think building the range first with more strength-based work. Yeah.
No, that's good. What would you say to any of our listeners that maybe think they're in impingement right now?
First, go get assessed by someone who's walking the walk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just know that there is more to the freaking answer of just get surgery. Like, your body, you know, it always wants to heal itself. You just have to give it the reason to, and the environment to. Yeah. So yeah, man, start exploring, start, you know, getting strong around the structure of the hip. Everything we've been saying, man, like, it's not a good enough statement to just say, go get surgery, or just take time off and rest and whatever. Like, start changing up your training. If it's like, if you're an athlete who's just in chronic pain from their training, like, start changing some things up, you know? Yeah.
100%. And where can the listeners find your work? I was talking about a little bit at the start, but I mean, kind of
basically Instagram at G Money Movement. I got a website right now, gmoneymovement.com. Cool. Other than that, that's it.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for taking some time to sit down with me and talk about this stuff. This is the kind of stuff I think that needs to be talked about more, and people need to hear it from a perspective of someone else's journey, and not only someone else's journey in that they're learning to overcome this and deal with this, but also have taken a path of, you know, you're a doctor of physical therapy now, and you're learning to kind of relay this message to a greater audience and help a lot of other people. And yeah, that's what my podcast is all about, bringing these people to the listeners. So thanks
Absolutely, man.
thanks for coming on, man.
For sure, dude. It was a pleasure.